Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Big win for Guido Vianello in Philadelphia on the Boots Ennis undercard, where he's stopped Alexis Barriere, the Canadian fighter, in 5 rounds. And this fight was seesaw and far more action than I was anticipating. Both these guys were eager to trade and both had their success in this fight. But it was a Vianello who came out aggressive in round 4 that was landing the right hand that ultimately started walking through shots and got to Alexis Barriere. Alexis Barriere heading into this one, the Canadian, was unbeaten at 12-0. Vianello, as we know, he is not an unbeaten fighter, but he is talented. He was coming off a loss to Richard Torrez where he didn't disgrace himself, but he sort of run out of puff down the stretch. Ultimately lost that one by decision, pretty wide actually. So it was interesting to see how he was going to turn up. And he turned up with aggression. So ultimately, first round, he was able to establish the right hand. He, taller fighter, a couple of inches on Alexis Barriere. He was able to land that right hand and he was looking for it right throughout the round. But as Barriere started to manage the distance from round 2, he was able to start to find a home for the left hand. And he was finding the left with a combination of setting up the jab or just counter-punching or punching with Vianello. And ultimately, rounds 2 and 3, he was gaining in confidence. And I gave those 2 rounds to Alexis Barriere. But it was round 4. I don't know what they told him between rounds, but Vianello just absolutely bull out of the gate and came through just looking to land big shots, aggressive, trying to walk through Alexis Barriere's punches. He, in the process, was taking some big left hands, but ultimately he landed a big right of his own and he buckled Barriere and just pounced on him. Literally just fired off a dozen shots. Ultimately, Alexis Barriere dazed and confused on the canvas. And he had to survive about 15 seconds. Ultimately, just before the bell, he was sort of sat on the ropes and sat on the middle rope, I think it was. And I was thinking, is this, another 5 or 10 seconds could have been called off. He was told in the corner to clinch, told in the corner to take a knee if he had to, but ultimately he didn't need to do any of those things because Guido Vianello just dropped him with a big right hand, and Alexis Barriere was all over the shop. And the referee started the count, but ultimately waved it off at about 6 or 7. So big win for Guido Vianello because this was a bit of a heat check sort of fight. Where was he at? Because we've seen him in very good fights with the likes of F.A. Ajagba, where he was unlucky not to win that one. He's had a very good win over Aslanbek Makhmudov, and Makhmudov was just out in the same weekend that he was. So ultimately, we know he's got a level. It's somewhere around top 20 to top 30-ish, maybe not quite elite or not quite in contender status, but not far away. He is a fringe contender. He's got good feet, decent power, and as we saw again, he does have a decent chin. He showed that against Torres, he showed that against the Jugba, and ultimately, last couple of fights where he has been in aggressive mode, he's actually looked really good and fun to watch. Earlier in his career, it's sort of been a little bit sort of hot and cold. So too, actually, Alexis Barriere. I had followed some of his earlier career and, quite liked what I'd seen. So heading into this one, I was interested to see what the style matchup would be. Was this going to be tactical? One of the things that I've been critical of Barriere in the past is sometimes he can just sort of stand in front of his opponent, using head feints, foot feints, and not really doing a lot. And not really pulling the trigger. And he certainly got pulled up by his corner, Sugar Hill Stewart, for doing that. Basically was told, no point just fainting, you've got to do something after it. And ultimately, he got the confidence in round 2, started to look even more confident, but then ran into a big right hand in that 4th round that really did change the course of this fight. because I was thinking, Barriere, he really is growing in confidence and looking really good here. But ultimately, a shootout for the last couple of rounds didn't pay off for Barriere. Perhaps he should have been a little bit more conservative. I guess some of his natural inclination is to box and move, use his footwork. He did, show very good footwork in this fight. Both these guys, decent technicians, know how to box, but ultimately they opted to basically go to war and brawl in this one to some extent. And it was a fun fight, enjoyable fight. I wouldn't mind seeing it again because I think the result could be different if Barriere was just a little bit more circumspect. We have seen Guido sort of fade a little bit down the stretch, and as it was, I think at round 3 or round 4, he was breathing quite heavy. But then again, as we saw in the Torrez fight, he can breathe heavy but continue to sort of push on. Ultimately didn't win that one, but he does seem to be able to sort of continue fighting tide, as it were. But the Gladiator, he does have a good position in the heavyweight division, and I think, if anything, because they're talking about Makhmudov being a fight for Joshua, if he is looking for a tune-up fight, someone that is going to be good work, why aren't they looking at someone like Guido Vianello? Be a pretty honest fight. And I think he would give Joshua a few things to think about. But ultimately, Joshua, if he's still got anything left, should beat him. Vianello now ranked number 26 in the world. And I think actually that's a fair reflection of where he's really at with his career and his sort of position in the heavyweight division. Not quite sort of one of the top contenders, but sort of on the fringes there. And depending on the matchups, he can be in some very good fights and give guys good rounds, as we saw against the likes of Ajagba and Torrez, for example. Unlucky not to win that one against Ajagba. In terms of Alexis Barriere, well, this was a step up for him. He was unbeaten. Perhaps it was, I don't want to say too much too soon, but I think there needed to be a few more incremental steps. So he'd just sort of recently signed on to fight with DAZN, with Matchroom. Ultimately, though, some of the opponents in the last couple of years, say 2025, a guy called Ubaldo Igor Resendez, Guillermo Casas, Mike Marshall. So that's his last couple of years. I think he's underdone from the perspective of he needed rounds, but also he probably needed a bit more meaningful opposition to help him step through the levels. I don't think he was overawed or outclassed necessarily in this one, but he potentially could have been better prepared. So on BoxRec now, he's now sort of fallen down to number 76, but he didn't look out of place against Vianello at all. On a different night, maybe different tactics, a bit more luck, all that sort of stuff. Perhaps it could have been different. But I guess, as Vianello might say, well, you make your own luck. And he did in that fight. Round 4, changed the fight and ultimately ended it in the 5th. Vianello, he moves on. Good win for him. Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.